grab a coffee, pull up a chair, and let's talk about roastery hazards. This is a topic that not a lot of roasters talk about, but injury and accidents can happen in a roastery at any time. So the important thing is knowing what injuries and accidents are most common in a roastery so that you can hopefully prevent them and then mitigate if something is to happen. I wrote a series of articles in this year's Roast magazine. The first issue was all about fire, and that's in the January-February episode, and I made a video talking about roastery fires. I'll link that up above. And the March-April issue features an article I wrote about acute roastery hazards. So that's what I want to talk about in this video today, because again, I don't feel like people talk about this enough, but I know many people who have had workplace injuries that probably could have been preventable. So here is the article that I'm talking about. Acute injuries and workplace accidents. First of all, I start out, accidents can and do happen in roasteries, minor cuts and burns to life-altering physical injuries, and even death. You can die in a roastery at work. This is like serious business, which is why I want to raise awareness about this so we can be safe. To start off, let's talk about the most common injuries that can happen in a roastery, mainly cuts and burns. I mean, when you're working as a roaster, you're usually slicing open coffee bags, so you have a knife or a box cutter, and there are other sharp objects around. There are often nails protruding from pallets, so the way to prevent cuts is really just to be aware. And I think that really a lot of this stuff will boil down to when we're at work, when roasters are at work, we really need to be keyed into what we're doing. We need to pay attention. I think it's really easy to kind of go on autopilot, especially if you've worked at the same roastery for many years, especially if you're predominantly in production. But staying engaged, staying keyed into what you're doing is the best way to prevent injuries. Also with cuts, this is kind of common knowledge, but make sure that you're cutting away from yourself and that there aren't any other people around you when using sharp tools. And then there's burns, because we're lighting a fire every day for the roastery. That fire makes things hot and the machinery can get hot. The beans are obviously hot when they fall out of the cooling tray. I've burned my lip when I was using the dryer one time. I got a little bit too close and I burned the top of my lip. There have been times where I've leaned up against the cooling tray. One really hot summer, I was wearing shorts and I leaned up against the cooling tray and burned the top of my thigh. Neither of those, my lip and my thigh, were totally fine. They were just kind of like, they blistered a little bit and got better on their own. But it's something that we don't really think about. Again, staying present, staying aware, staying alert during the workday is really crucial to prevent these kinds of injuries. Make sure you cool down the machine completely before you do any maintenance or cleaning. I know a lot of roasters will clean at the end of a roasting day, and if you get into the machine before the roaster is all the way cooled down, you can risk burning yourself. There's also accidents that are caused by heavy machinery, which includes forklifts, the roaster machine itself. I have a friend, no joke, who almost lost her entire arm because she was reaching into the cooling tray while the cooling arms are spinning. This is something that I harp on all the time because it's a serious matter. Do not reach into the cooling tray when the arms are spinning, not even to pull out a Quaker, not to pull out anything. If you need to reach into the cooling tray, pause the arms from spinning, reach in, resume the arms to spin. The chance that your arm will get caught is relatively low, but the impact, if it does, is very high. In order to prevent heavy machinery accidents, roasters really need proper education, proper training on all heavy machinery. That includes forklifts, the roaster machines themselves, any packaging equipment. I know roasters whose fingers have gotten stuck in a belt on a packaging line. That can be really bad. So making sure that all roasters and operators are adequately trained. There are guards on anything where clothing could get caught. And also, don't wear loose-fitting clothing in the roastery. Don't wear things with threads or pieces of cloth that are hanging off. Don't wear jewelry because that can get caught in heavy equipment. And then make sure to communicate. If you're starting a machine, make sure that you have good communication so that everybody in the roastery knows what machinery is being used so that they're aware of the potential hazards. Another roastery hazard that not a lot of people think about is heat stress and dehydration, especially in the summertime, especially in a non-temperature controlled warehouse. I used to work in Colorado where in the wintertime, I would be bundled up with like long underwear, long sleeve shirt, sweatshirt, plus coveralls over the top, and like huddling close to the roaster just to stay warm. But then in the summertime, it would be sweltering in there. I would be in a shorts and a t-shirt and just dripping with sweat because it would be so hot. And I know from personal experience, roasters are not the greatest at staying hydrated, at drinking, at taking breaks during a roast day. But this, especially, as I said, in a really hot environment, can really lead to danger. If you don't stay hydrated, if you don't have a well-ventilated roastery, and if you don't take breaks out of the heat to re-regulate your temperature, you could be doing damage to your body that could lead to heat stress or a heat stroke even in really hot environments or over a prolonged period of time. So make sure you're taking care of yourself. Stay hydrated, period, all the time. And also use electrolytes. This is something that when I worked at Black and White, they had electrolytes available at all times. So because really an 8-hour, 9-hour, 10-hour roasting day, if you're on your feet, if you're scooping, if you're moving buckets, if you're basically like doing physical activity for 8, 9, 10 hours, you're gonna lose some electrolytes. So make sure to replenish those along with water. Another injury is slips, trips, and falls, especially if you have brewing equipment. There might be water on the floor or coffee on the floor, which can be a slipping hazard. If you have pallets in places that they shouldn't be, or even just coffee bags on the floor, keep your space organized. Make sure to keep obstacles out of walking paths. And as a last resort, have one of those like tent things, or a few of them around the roastery, the tents that say, slippery or whatever, just so that people kind of see that if there is a puddle on the floor or something out of place, that they have a visual cue to be aware. Another roastery hazard I've heard of is head injuries. And this might seem kind of out of left field, but I have a friend who was getting something down from racking above, and a box like up above fell, hit her on the head, and she got a concussion. This can happen to anyone, anywhere, but again, it just means roasters need to be aware, be mindful of what they're doing, and also, as kind of goes for everything before this and after, ask for help if you need it. If something is too heavy for you to lift, because that's another thing, strain, muscle strain, back strain. If you're trying to lift a coffee bag by yourself, there's no reason that you need to do that. Get a coworker to help you. Ask for help when you need it, because that's a really good way to injure yourself by not asking for help. So if something is too heavy or too high, make sure that you get the proper equipment, ladders, and backup. Get other people to help you. There's also eye injury that can happen in the roastery, especially while cleaning, because there are chemicals floating around the air as you're cleaning. There's also particulate, dust, and chaff that might be flying around, or tiny bits of beans that can really do damage to your eye if it goes in and scratches your eye. So make sure that there's personal protective equipment, goggles available for any time you're doing tasks where there's more of a chance for airborne particulate that could get in your eyes. And the last thing I want to say is accidents do happen. That's why they're accidents. And roasteries are filled with hazards everywhere that can cause these accidents. So the important thing is to put preventative measures in place, and also have a first aid kit, and make sure to have a protocol for if anything were to happen. Don't just have that protocol, but train all employees on what to do if there is an emergency. And even better, review that regularly with everyone in the roastery so that all employees are aware of what to do. If you want more information, read my article in the March-April issue of Roast magazine and stay tuned for my next video in this series about my series in Roast magazine. The next one will be about chronic or kind of building injuries. If you have any stories about roaster emergencies, put those in the comments below because I would love to hear what happened and how you responded. Then make sure to like, subscribe, and follow for more coffee and coffee roasting content. Thanks for watching. Cheers and happy roasting.